Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Parenting Connection Show or God, Family, Politics, depending on where you're listening. Our nation was shaken yesterday by an event that is just really undescribable. Something that's becoming more common in areas. And just a couple of years ago, we had one in Texas. But if you have not heard about the Uvalde shooting, that happened yesterday. And so I don't listen to a lot of news anymore. And so I'm very careful where I get my news sources from. And so yesterday, leaving work, I just had a flash from my phone that said school shooting in Uvalde. I was like, no way, no way. And so when I got home, I turned on One American News to see what was going on. And of course, here in Texas, where we're at, not in our area, it's about 4 hours away from us, there was another school shooting. And so today I have Pastor Scott Box on, and he's talking about his book. His book is called Heroic, and that's my Invisalign. It makes me have this lisp. Heroic disgrace. Mr.
Oh,
Box, welcome to the show.
oh, thank you. I totally understand that when the tongue gets stuck, it's all
Yes, it
good.
does. Get stuck to these plastic things in my mouth. So, but they're doing their job. They are doing their job. And so,
Good,
Mr.
good.
Box, tell us about tell you were actually a worship leader. So tell us what you're doing right
Yeah.
now.
Well, shoot, I kind of I want to be sensitive to the direction you took that just a moment ago, and just acknowledge that these are these are really frustrating times, and having the just having the right spirit in which to address these things as leaders is really hard. And I can only put myself in, I mean, I can only project myself being in that situation and think of how horrifying it would be to be in those parents' shoes and that community's shoes. I know all of us can put ourselves right that thought of, oh man, that elementary school right down the street. It could have happened. I drove past our elementary school that's right across the street from our house, and just today, the gates that are normally open are closed today. Um, anyway, I wanted to acknowledge that, and I kind of even forget your question. So, um,
No, that's okay because we're kind of consumed by this. It doesn't just affect a town in Uvalde; it
right,
affects all of us. It
yes,
does because without the proper care and help and having things in place, and it sounds like the school did have some things in place,
that's good. Yeah,
but
sure.
we lock our cars not because of the bad people, because the bad people are going to break in no matter
Right,
what.
no matter what.
We lock
Yes.
the cars because of the good people that might be in need and at that moment do some snap and might want to steal. And
Hmm.
so a journey. So your journey, you've had this
Yeah.
journey with mental health, and so actually you've been a worship leader for
Yes.
25 years.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
You bet. I I spent time as a kid being amazed by the music leaders in the church that I grew up in, Seattle. Currently, I'm in Central Oregon and love this place. You're welcome to visit, but don't stay. How about that? But uh, I loved the worship component of church. I loved going and feeling whatever the feeling was. I loved it. So I wanted to do that as a career. What I didn't realize as I grew older was that there was this intersection for me with mental health and worship. And I explain it this way. It's just simply that I was I was too broken to be the hero that I thought I was supposed to be. I was too sinful to be the worshiper that I thought I was to be. And then ultimately, I was too fearful to be hopeful. And so there was just a lot that I was struggling with on the way toward diagnosis. And now we can talk about that.
You know, so your book, if it focuses around you having been diagnosed with bipolar.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so that, and for a lot of Christians would have a hard time with that because we believe that we should just give it all to Jesus. You suck
Right.
it up, and you
Right.
know all this. But in reality, people deal with real stuff, and
Yeah.
there's really chemical imbalances that can cause us not to feel correctly.
Yeah.
Not just that, it is also a spiritual battle.
Sure.
So, can you share a little bit about what that was? I mean, is that something that you came out to your church? I mean, how did you
Yeah.
even get the diagnosis?
Oh, that was so the coming out to the church thing, I got really good counsel early on to from my psychologist and the medical team that surrounded my wife and myself that it's okay to tell whoever you want to tell, but don't tell whoever you want to tell. It was very freeing in that regard. As far as how I got my diagnosis, Carrie Ann, my wife and I ended up in we were looking to adopt a child, and you know one of the things that you end up adopt is you end up going to a counselor uh, so they can check the boxes that you're you know you're mentally stable. You can invite a child into your home, and so that's we kind of stumbled into to counseling and into a psychologist who became a really a great friend and a partner in this for years now. We're 15 years into our journey. Uh, it took about a year of counseling and doing marriage, basically marriage counseling, that our psychologist said, you know, maybe we should go ahead and pursue uh, a diagnosis and just see, you know, however that worked. I don't remember her wording exactly, but it took about a year of meeting with her before I received any diagnosis.
And so, do you know any of the statistics about people that do suffer with mental health disorders?
No, I no. What do you what do you
No,
got?
I'm just asking, I've been more of an advocate when it comes to, like, abuse and stuff like that, so I would know
Okay.
that, like, 1 in 4 people have witnessed or been in an abusive,
Okay.
situation, and we do know that a lot of that may stem from drug and alcohol abuse,
Sure.
but also
Yeah.
mental disorders as well, and so I
Yeah.
didn't know if you had done any research on that.
No.
So why did you write
Yes.
hero great disgrace?
Yeah, disgrace,
I
heroic disgrace. Yeah.
why did you write it? I mean, because then you
Yeah.
you really do put it out there when you put it in writing, you can't take it
Yeah.
back.
You do, don't you? Ah, okay, so I wanna go back to that idea of putting it out there for the church because that might tie in. I that is a risk, and I knew that putting myself I knew that sharing my story of my bipolar disorder journey was uh, it was a thing. I mean, and the church has struggled with it, maybe because I think the church finds it more comfortable to be able to speak to the spirit side of things rather than the body and the mind. I think the church, in other words, I think the church might struggle with the wholeness of the person, which shouldn't be the case, but in my experience, it has been the case. The church struggles with addressing the mind, the body, and the spirit.
And so, I've always been taught that we live in a body and we have a mind, but
Right.
we also have a soul.
Right.
And so, what effects do you feel that the pandemic? I do know some of the statistics. I don't know actual statistics. I just know that there was a rise in all kinds of crazy, during the pandemic. So, what effects do you feel that whole thing had on it?
I can speak to the the I'll just go there with the one thing in particular that really affected me was masking. Just not being able to see people's faces. Uh, I'm a visual learner, and so or I don't know, I pick up on visual cues, and that was a really difficult thing. And if you can't tell, I'm pretty expressive. Just my facial expression.
Musicians awfully are.
Yeah,
Musicians are.
and yeah, and so that was, as you can imagine, was very difficult for me, and it put me into a really I struggled with some depressive stuff, for sure. Thankfully, I'm medicated, and I've for years now been able to manage the as your audience may or may not know, but bipolar disorder has significant emotional highs and then just as
Low.
significant or worse emotional lows. And the so the pandemic did play with that a little bit. Thankfully, I was in the midst of writing this book, and I was really in a healthy place of being able to address some of these challenges myself without external help. I had been able to, I have at this point in my life.
You're freezing up a little. Here, I'm gonna ask you one more question that way I can get off the band wave because when we're both on there, I think it pulls a little bit. Okay, so there are a lot of misconceptions that mental health struggles are really a lack of faith. I think
Right.
I've felt like that before in the past. I used to deal with the spirit of fear,
Yeah.
greatly, and I've had, issues with anxiety in the past as well. I did have to get delivered from some of that, and I did, but, the reality of it, if people aren't eating right and, if you're not doing certain things, it can add on to this. Can you talk a little bit to the misconceptions
Sure.
that are out there?
My my experience with bipolar disorder in particular is that this was something that I couldn't pray away. And I think that the struggle that I had coming from the church backgrounds that I've had too is that that's one of the things people expected is that you this is something you should be able to to not be dealing with was kind of the reality that I was faced with in churches. But the truth of the matter is that when there are chemical imbalances in the brain, it's not much different than having a broken arm that you need to go to the doctor and you got to reset the bone, put, get a cast on, and then heal. Now, mental disorder, you can't necessarily. In my case, I've not been able to heal it, but in my experience, God makes healthy what He doesn't choose to heal. God makes healthy what He heals doesn't heal, and so for me, I'm not healed, but I am proof that you can become healthy.
So what do you hope readers will gain by reading your book?
Hmm. So you and I might be very different in a lot of ways, but but one of the things in particular that I know men, I can speak to the masculine side of things, is that we want to be the hero. We do. And I I realized at one point in time that I couldn't be the stinking hero. and it drove me nuts. I was too broken, and I for some reason, whether it's the family I grew up in or my own cobbled together Frankenstein of what it meant to be heroic, I couldn't I couldn't meet that expectation. And so for me, my hope is that people who read my story will recognize that I took the time to tell my story, to 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 make my story my witness. And that I wish that we could that's kind of how I've connected it to worship. And I know that might throw some people, but worship is so much more than singing songs at church on Sunday. It's worship is a lifestyle. And that's the connection for me in telling my story that I hope people get out of it is that our lifestyle is our worship. And Jesus models that. Jesus's lifestyle was his absolute dependence, desperate dependence on God the Father. He modeled that for us. That's what I would love people to get out of my story.
You know, so the and in being a worship leader, I can see how you would be under attack.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and quite a bit because there comes this place in worship, and you go ahead and be honest. Tell me if you feel differently. There
Sure.
comes this place when you're in worship and that the worship is strong and you've been in it and you're doing it and you're really focused in and zoned in on bringing bringing God's presence
Yeah.
or manifestation of his presence, that there becomes this veil that's almost lifted in worship to where almost anything is possible at that moment. um,
Yeah.
so
Uh,
has the
yeah.
medicine affected your worship any?
Oh, that is such a good question. I oh wow. So medicine has taken the highs and brought them down, and they've taken the lows and brought them up. So instead of this massive ping pong that I was dragging my entire family through, imagine being my wife and having to deal with that. Um, it's shrunk that. So I've got yeah, the peaks and valleys are much more manageable. As that pertains to worship, it is interesting. Ooh, the as a
Let it go,
music
brother. Let it
leader,
go.
no,
Let it go.
I love this. Thank you. That is so as a music leader, when you're on platform and you're thinking about the various things, I mean, you're not just leading the congregation, but you're leading the band behind you. And you're concentrating on, am I hitting the right chords? What there's all sorts of different things that are entering my mind, not excluding things like, uh, oh wow, that's a really, really pretty girl down there. Or, oh wow, the pastor just nodded his head. Uh, does he mean something by that? I mean, oh
Mm,
man, one of
mm,
those lights just went on. Oh, somebody just yelled and screamed from the back. Is that somebody with a gun, or is somebody just got, having an experience with Jesus? I mean, my
right.
word. So having to manage the just the experience of leading worship is a thing. As it pertains to the medication side of it, I can't speak to whether or not that amplified or minimized my ability to feel the room or anything like that. I will say this, that if there's anything that I could have back from those days of riding the highs and the lows, it would be the hypomanic. It would be that that glorious drug-like place, like good high of hypomania. I call it in my book
Mhm,
Hypomania land. It's like
mhm.
Disneyland. You go, it's like the morning, it's like Christmas morning over and over and over again until you get
That's
too
what I
high.
love about worship. That's, that's really what I love about worshiping and that private time
Yeah.
at home, and to where, you could just dance before the Lord and you
Yes.
can just feel, but you don't get that feeling. You don't get that feeling all day long,
No, no, you
but
don't,
I think
right?
that's how it helps me cope and maintain and stay sane.
Yeah.
But we have to have that. And I
Well,
can see how that can be difficult if the worship leader's mind is all over the place.
oh yeah.
And
No,
so
absolutely. Absolutely. What does your personal experience in church, I know you're the interviewer, but
it's okay.
I'm
You
curious
never know
what
what's gonna happen on the show.
no, this is so fun. I your your experience in church personally, have you ever thought about what's happening on platform or what the leader's doing? Or are you primarily focused on what God's doing in your heart? Or uh, how does that work for you? I guess that's a really
Well,
interesting question for me.
I've never thought about that. I remember this skit that, I seen when, when I was a teenager about, all the people up there worshiping and you had,
Yeah.
one person actually listen to a sports game, one person thinking about their hair. They wonder if their hair is looking right.
Yes.
All the while their hands are up, looking
Yes.
looking like they're worshiping, but their minds are far, far, far from the Lord. And so and
Yeah.
there and so and that's the thing. We don't know what a worship leader actually
Yeah.
goes through up there. Never actually really thought about it. Um Never really thought about it. In my opinion, worship, nowadays gets cut too short. It gets cut
Ooh.
right before the miracles begin to happen,
Boom.
right before
Yes,
you can
right.
actually hear the Holy Spirit speaking. It, right before, it just gets cut,
Yeah.
because we're following this routine. And our God is the creator of time.
Mm.
He exists outside of time. And
Yes.
so, for us to cut it off right when he's ready to show up, because remember, we're
Yes.
worshiping him. We were
Right.
created to worship him. And so, I sit there and fight with my thoughts as
Dude,
well
yeah.
when I'm
Oh, yeah.
supposed to be worshiping, right?
Yeah.
And I think we all do.
Mhm.
But I try my best, and when I have had the best experiences is when
Yeah.
I focus, in my head that I'm actually sitting there worshiping the Father and the Son. And
Okay.
so, and and just in the past few years, I've added the Holy Spirit in there. And so,
Right.
um, but the one thing that we do forget, Scott, we forget that people are human. We
Oh, yeah.
always want to hold other people to this higher standard, and we
Yeah.
forget that there's things going on at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
There may be a chemical imbalance in somebody's
Yeah.
body. And so we're asking these people to get up there and lead us into worship when, their son just ran away, or
Totally.
their daughter just got caught at school with drugs,
Right.
or they lost somebody, in a pandemic. And so
For
we
sure.
don't know, we don't ever truly know what people are going through unless they tell us.
Right.
And one thing about the whole mask
Yes.
thing, to
Right.
me it was
Right.
just it was a sign to me that they wanted you to shut your mouth. We watched the church get shut down, and where we needed that link, It was broken. And at the one
Right.
time, and I understand safety and everything. Yeah, you needed to be safety because
Of
I got
course. Sure.
COVID
Right.
because my daughter was, kissing all over me and hugging me and stuff. And
Right.
so,
Right.
there needed to be, but the one thing that didn't need to happen was for the church to shut its doors, because
Yeah.
where two or more are gathered together, Jesus
Mm,
is in the midst.
mm.
And I just took over your show, Scott, and so I'm about to give it
No,
back to you.
this is so good. No, well, and I love this is what I love. This means so much. I, here's what I hear you saying. Mm, I'm gonna put no. This is what
No,
I
no,
want
I
in
want to hear it. I want to hear it. I
response
want to hear
to,
it. I want to hear it.
yeah, in response to what your thought is. I don't want to lead worship as a worship leader without referencing my desperation for Jesus. So
Mm,
from this is what I have learned in my journey is that I will not lead or be a worship leader if I cannot how reference my desperation for Jesus, which I think ultimately makes me a better worship leader because
absolutely.
I can just bare my soul. People will go, "Oh, yes, that's refreshing. This guy isn't perfect." And because I that's
Right.
the last thing I want to do is set myself be to be perfect because I'm not. But I am
And
trying
you're
to be
not. And
consistent.
because you're a worship leader and you have been given that gift to usher people into the presence of God, you're going to be
Yeah.
attacked even more. Yeah, I mean, the whole goal is to get Scott not to worship, to
Right.
get Scott so far off the path that he cannot lead people into the presence of the Lord.
Mm,
Because in the presence, there's liberty, there's healing, there's
yeah.
deliverances, there's people
Right.
running to the Lord to get healed. And I hate when I hear people say, that those charismatics, they love to worship their praise and praise their worship. No, we were created to worship the Lord, and when
Yeah.
we begin
Yeah.
to worship him, those bells come down. I mean, it
Yeah.
thins out to where you can almost feel and
Yes.
touch that
Yeah.
presence. And so I'm so glad that you wrote this book. And
Thank you.
I did took, you know what? I do. Burning desires. I want you to, what is in your heart to tell everybody before we
Oh.
leave today?
Oh, I've got this. I was looking at my iPad here going, "Oh, there's so much I want to say." Here's just a quick story. There was a time when I'm trying my best to connect this to how you opened our time together. Uh, there are times in life where where decisions for us, circumstances happen to us that we can't control, and we can control our response. When Carrie Ann and I were sitting in a counseling session, there was where our counselor looked at my wife. She just basically forgot I was in the room, the two of them. And she looks at Carrie Ann, the counselor does, and she says, Carrie Ann, uh, okay for you to grieve a man that you thought you married. And I sat back and I just started bawling. I
To
mean,
come
that,
in and say, wow.
yeah,
I had to come in and say,
I
wow.
totally. I mean,
Thank
it was such a gut punch. And, uh, but then Libby, our counselor, Libby is her name. She said, but Carrie Ann, don't grieve for too long. Dream new dreams. Dream new dreams. And here's the thing at the end of the day, stuff happens to us, life happens, bad things happen to us. And it's okay. We have to give each other permission to grieve because God
you.
God gives us that permission. But what we as Christians believe is that God, this is so much more than just this flesh and blood right now. God has given us eternity. And so, how dare we not dream new dreams?
Right, right. And he places them in our heart, you know, he does. And so somebody told me recently, Tyra, God is not a tease. That these things
No.
that, you know, he's
Yes.
showing you, these little
He
opportunities are
is not
just
a
glimpses of
tease.
what he wants to do.
Come on. That's right.
Scott,
Yes.
thank you so much, and I
You're
wanna
welcome.
check in on you in about 6 months, so keep in
Cool.
touch. I wanna check in and see how you're doing, check on the book and see what else you're up to and any progress or anything.
You bet.
Thank you for watching the Parenting Connection show. I'll see you next week. Bye.